Instructor Kyle stood before 47 cadets with the absolute certainty of someone who had never lost a sanctioned match. His forearms gestured smoothly as he explained defensive positioning, his exoskeleton plating gleaming under the training hall's lights. The Vraxian had spent 15 years teaching combat across 6 sectors, and his methodology was legendary precise, disciplined, undefeated. "Observe the karate formation," he announced. His secondary arms crossed over his chest. "Weight distribution, 60% rear, 40% forward. This allows rapid retreat while maintaining strike capability." Most cadets took notes dutifully. A few looked interested. Most calculated how many minutes remained until break. Maya Chun stood off to the side. Weight shifted onto her left hip, right knee slightly bent, arms loose. At 5'5" and maybe 130 pounds, she looked impossibly small beside the massive Vraxian. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple tail. She wore the Academy's standard training uniform and possessed the general demeanor of someone waiting for a delayed shuttle. "My assistant. Instructor will now demonstrate proper stance for a human-sized combatant facing a larger opponent," Kyle said, gesturing without looking. "Chun, if you would." Chun didn't move. Kyle turned, his facial plate shifting with what might have been amusement. "Chun, the defensive stance, please." "I'm in it," she said. A few cadets snickered. Kyle's plates shifted again closer to irritation. He moved toward her with confident strides. "You were standing casually. Your weight is improperly distributed. Your hands are not raised. If I were to strike now, you'd miss," Chun said, still not moving. The classroom went quiet in that particular way rooms do when someone has said something either very stupid or very interesting, and nobody is sure which yet. Kyle stopped 3 feet from her, his secondary arms unfolding. "Your stance leaves you vulnerable to attack from multiple angles. A proper guard position requires. Are you going to lecture me or demonstrate?" Chun asked, examining her fingernails. "Because if it's a lecture, I should probably grab coffee." Kyle's career had been built on discipline, strategy, and the systematic application of superior force. He did not appreciate having his methodology questioned by someone who weighed less than his thorax plating. "Very well." A demonstration. He didn't telegraph it. That was the thing. Kyle was a decorated combat instructor precisely because he understood that real threats didn't announce themselves. His primary right arm snapped forward in a textbook strike fast, controlled, aimed at center mass with enough force to move her back several feet and make the point about stance vulnerability crystal clear. Chun's weight shifted maybe 3 inches. Her right hand came up in a lazy arc, caught his wrist from underneath, and redirected the strike past her left shoulder. Her left hand pressed against his elbow joint, not striking, just guiding. His own momentum carried him forward and down. She pivoted her hips maybe 20 degrees. Kyle hit the mat face first with a sound, like dropping a sack of hammers. Chun's weight settled back onto her left hip. Same posture, same bored expression. The classroom erupted into noise. Kyle lay there for approximately 3 seconds, processing what had just occurred. His forearms pushed against the mat, lifting his considerable bulk back to standing. His plates had flushed deep amber embarrassment, visible even through alien biology. "You," he started. "Moved," Chung finished. "A little bit. Didn't change my stance, though." She glanced at the class, most of whom had stopped taking notes and started recording. "That's going to be on the extranet by lunch, isn't it?" An Equinari cadet in the 3rd row, all chitinous plates and compound eyes, raised one of her 6 arms. "Instructor Chun, what technique was that?" "Physics," Chun said. "From which discipline?" Pressed a Dralkin near the back, his silicon-based form grinding slightly as he leaned forward. "The one where I don't feel like getting hit." Chun looked at Kyle. who was still processing his unplanned trip to the floor. "You wanted to demonstrate vulnerability and improper stance, so I let you demonstrate. Your stance was great, by the way. Really grounded, stable. Made it super easy to tell exactly where your momentum was going." Kyle's secondary arms clenched. "That was not proper technique requires. I need to be somewhere." Chun interrupted, checking a non-existent chronometer on her wrist. "Class is yours, instructor. Try not to demonstrate anything else without warming up first." She walked toward the exit, still moving with that same casual, weight-shifted gait that apparently doubled as a combat stance. The door closed behind her. 47. Cadets stared at Kyle. Kyle stared at the door. Somewhere in the back of the room, a human cadet, one of only 3 in the class, started laughing. Not mockery. Something else. Recognition, maybe. "Dismissed," Kyle said, his voice tight. "Study the karate formations for next session. We will not speak of this again." But the recordings were already uploading. The observation lounge on Station Helix 7 had been designed for tactical review sessions, comfortable seating, multiple holographic projectors, acoustic damping that kept conversations private. What it had not been designed for was 11 different species, attempting to explain a 3-second interaction that had fundamentally violated their understanding of combat dynamics. "Run it again," said Instructor Vess. A Kulnari, whose compound eyes could process visual information at roughly 4 times the speed of most bipedal species. Her translator implant gave her voice a crystalline quality, like wind chimes having an argument. The hologram flickered, displaying Chun's redirect in slow motion for the 18th time. "There," Vess said, her chitinous finger pointing. "She initiates contact 0.73 seconds before optimal interception. That means she's predicting his trajectory, not reacting to it. Prediction implies she knows his attack pattern," countered Drex, the Dralkin, whose silicon-based metabolism made him the slowest speaker in the room but also the most methodical thinker. Each word emerged like rock settling. "They've trained together for 16 months. Pattern recognition, not precognition." "Then explain the weight transfer," said a karate observer from the Tactical Academy on Perimeter Station 9. She was tall, scaled, with the kind of tail that doubled as a weapon. "Watch her rear foot. It doesn't move. The pivot comes entirely from her hips and core musculature. That shouldn't generate enough rotational force to redirect a Vraxian strike. Unless," offered a human voice from the back corner. "The rotational force isn't the point." Everyone turned. The human cadet from Kyle's class, the one who'd been laughing, stood near the refreshment dispenser, holding something that smelled aggressively of caffeine. He was young, maybe 20 standard years, with the kind of build that suggested either excellent genetics or too much time in the gym. Elaborate cadet ... Vess checked her roster display. Ramos. Ramos took a long drink before answering. "She's not generating force. She's borrowing it. Everything Instructor Kyle put into that strike, she just gave it a new address. Momentum transfer requires equal and opposite resistance," Drex said slowly. "She provided no resistance." "Exactly." Ramos gestured at the frozen hologram. "That's the whole trick. Every species in this room evolved with natural weapons or armor. You all learned to fight by being harder to hurt than the other guy. Humans didn't get that option, so we learned to fight like water instead of walls." Vess's antennae twitched fascination or skepticism, hard to tell with Kulnari. "Water doesn't win fights." "Water," Ramos said, "carved the Grand Canyon." Before anyone could respond to that particular piece of philosophical combat theory, the room's eye interface chimed. Nomad, the station's neural operations and management analytical database, had a voice like someone had taught a library to speak. Calm, measured, slightly condescending. "If I may offer biomechanical analysis, Nomad said. Please, said Vess. A new hologram appeared, overlaying Chun's skeleton and muscular system in translucent blue. Human proprioception, spatial awareness of body positioning, operates through approximately 70 million neural pathways dedicated solely to balance and movement coordination. This is disproportionately high compared to species of similar size and mass. Evolutionary compensation for lacking natural weapons? Asked the karate observer. Partially. But consider, humans descended from arboreal primates who spent millions of years navigating three-dimensional environments at lethal heights. A miscalculation meant death. This created selection pressure for exceptional spatial processing and reactive adjustment capability. The hologram shifted, showing Chun's micro-movements frame by frame. What you're observing isn't technique. It's neurological architecture. She's making approximately 47 individual muscular adjustments per second, most of them unconscious. Her brain is essentially running combat probability calculations in real time without her awareness. That's... Drex paused, processing. Terrifying, actually. It gets better, Ramos said, grinning. Humans also have this fun evolutionary trait where we can ignore pain signals long enough to finish a fight. By evening, the footage had been viewed 40,000 times. By the next morning, combat instructors from 3 adjacent stations had submitted requests for Chen's training methodology. Kyle didn't read the comments. He spent that evening in the combat simulator, running the moment back frame by frame, trying to identify where his technique had failed. The answer, eventually, was as simple. It hadn't. His technique had been perfect. That was the problem. On the third day, Kyle entered Chun's office without knocking. It was smaller than most people expect. It 8 feet by 10, dominated by a desk that had seen better decades. Chun sat behind it, reviewing something on a datapad, still wearing her training uniform. She didn't look up. I require a rematch, Kyle said. 3 days. Full observation. Regulation arena. Kyle's plates had shifted from amber to crimson determination or possibly rage. I've trained against 73 different species. I will not be defeated by someone who can't even maintain proper guard position. Chun finally looked up. You want to get thrown again in front of an even bigger audience? Bold strategy. I have spent 72 hours preparing. I've consulted with combat analysts from 4 different academies. I've studied archive footage of human street fighting, military engagements, something called mixed martial arts that seems deliberately chaotic. And you think that'll help? Chun leaned back in her chair. I've learned about human skeletal structure, joint vulnerabilities, the way your muscles attach to bone without the reinforcement plating that makes Raxian physiology so resilient. His voice carried absolute conviction. I've learned how to break one. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Chun set down her datapad slowly. You've learned how to try to break one. There's a difference. She stood. Fine. 3 days. Regulation arena. But understand something, Kyle. What happened in that classroom wasn't me being clever. It was me being polite. You really want to see what happens when I'm not. Kyle's plates rippled with something that might have been doubt, quickly suppressed. I will not lose again. That's the spirit. Chen's expression was unreadable. Doors that way. Try not to demonstrate any more weaknesses on your way out. After Kyle left, Chun sat in silence for a long moment. Then she pulled up her personal comm and sent a brief message to the stations. Medical coordinator, you're going to want extra teams on standby for the arena match. Standard protocol should be sufficient, but have them ready. The response came back within seconds. Understood. Is there something we should know? Chung considered her answer carefully before typing. Just that someone asked a very dangerous question. And now they're going to get an honest answer. The combat arena at Station Helix 7 could accommodate 200 spectators during standard training exhibitions. By the time Kyle and Chun were scheduled to enter, there were 347 beings crammed into every available space, with another 600 streaming the feed remotely. Someone had set up a betting pool. The odds were not in Kyle's favor. In the 3 days leading up to the match, Kyle had done everything right. He'd analyzed Chun's movements down to the millisecond. He'd consulted with xenobiologists about human physiology. He'd modified his attack patterns to account for her redirect techniques. He'd drilled counters for every possible scenario his tactical mind could imagine. But doubt crept in during quiet moments. In the Academy's secondary training hall, Kyle faced a holographic representation of Chun running through attack sequences. Each time, the simulation predicted his trajectory and redirected it. Each time, he adjusted his approach. Each time, the simulation adapted faster. Again, he commanded. The hologram reset. Instructor Vess entered the hall, her chitinous form clicking softly against the floor. Kyle, I've reviewed your preparation protocols. They single quotes extensive. Thoroughness is essential. Thoroughness, yes. Obsession, less so. She moved closer. You're training to fight a human using Vraxian methodology. That's like trying to catch water with a net. Then what would you suggest? Not fighting her at all. Vess's compound eyes reflected the holographic light. Or accepting that some victories aren't about who hits harder. I cannot accept defeat from an opponent half my size with no formal training. She has training, just not the kind you recognize. Vess turned to leave, then paused. Kyle, you're a brilliant instructor, but you're fighting to prove a point. She's just existing. Those aren't equal motivations. After Vess left, Kyle stood alone in the training hall. The hologram waited patiently for his command. Again, he said, quieter this time. The simulation ran. He attacked. The holographic Chun redirected. He fell. Always. He fell. Meanwhile, Chen's preparation consisted of her normal routine, teaching her scheduled classes, drinking terrible coffee, and showing absolutely no indication that a highly publicized rematch was imminent. Ramos found her in the Academy's mess hall on the evening before the match, eating something that might have been noodles. Instructor Chun, can I ask you something? You just did. Why do you agree to the rematch? You already proved your point. Chun looked at him for a long moment. Because Kyle asked a question, and questions deserve honest answers. He wants to know if preparation and technique can overcome what he saw in that classroom. It's actually a good question. And can they? We'll find out tomorrow. She returned to her noodles. Probably not, though. You sound pretty confident for someone who's about to fight a Vraxian who spent 3 days learning how to break humans. Chen's expression didn't change. Ramos, you know what the difference is between fighting to win and fighting to survive? No, ma'am. When you fight to win, you have a plan. When you fight to survive, you have instinct refined by 300,000 years of everything trying to eat your ancestors. She set down her fork. Kyle has a plan. It's probably a very good plan. But plans require your opponent to cooperate. And I stopped cooperating with threats a long time ago. Is he a threat, though? This is a sanctioned match with medical teams standing by. My brain doesn't make that distinction very well. Chun stood, collecting her tray. Human nervous systems are wired for binary assessment, safe or not safe. Everything else is just details. Kyle chose not safe when he said he learned how to break one of us. She walked away, leaving Ramos with the uncomfortable realization that the upcoming match might be more serious than anyone anticipated. Chun arrived 7 minutes late, carrying a wrapped sandwich. You're eating, observed Lieutenant Sorrell. a Denari whose entire species prided itself on pre-combat fasting rituals. His fur rippled with disapproval. "I'm hungry," Chun said, taking another bite. "Fight's not for 3 minutes." Plenty of time. Across the arena floor, Kyle was running through warm-up sequences, striking combinations that blurred with speed despite his mass. His forearms moved in perfect synchronization, each strike placed with mathematical precision against invisible targets. Chun finished her sandwich, crumpled the wrapper, and tossed it into a recycling chute from 15 feet away. Perfect arc. Didn't watch it land. "Combatants enter the arena," announced Nomad's voice through the overhead speakers. The crowd noise rose. Anticipation mixed with morbid curiosity dotted in the observation booth. Vess had 6 different recording angles cued. Ramos sat in the front row, eating something that might have been popcorn. The karate observer from Perimeter Station 9 had brought colleagues. This had stopped being about training methodology and become something else entirely. Proof of concept. Chun walked onto the mat like she was heading to another boring meeting. No stretching. No breathing exercises. She just stood there, weight on one hip, arms loose. Kyle entered from the opposite side, and the difference was striking. He moved with purpose, with controlled aggression, with the absolute certainty of someone who'd identified the problem and engineered a solution. His forearms flexed in sequence, ready, prepared, dangerous. "Standard arena rules," Nomad announced. "Match ends at submission, incapacitation, or voluntary withdrawal. Lethal force is prohibited. Medical teams are standing by. Combatants acknowledge." "Acknowledged," Kyle said. Chun just nodded. "Begin." Kyle didn't rush. That was the first surprise. He circled, patient, using his reach advantage to control distance. His primary arms stayed forward guard position, textbook perfect. His secondary arms waited, coiled, ready to capitalize on openings. Chun rotated to face him. Minimal movement, tracking his position without apparent concern. "She's not even sweating," someone muttered in the crowd. "Match just started," someone else replied. Kyle fainted with his voice. Primary left, not committing, just testing. Chen's head tilted slightly, reading the intention. She didn't react. Kyle fainted again, different angle. Still nothing. Then he struck for real. Primary right. Same trajectory as the classroom demonstration, but with modified force distribution, 40% power instead of 70. He'd calculated that Chun's redirect technique required meeting his momentum at a specific threshold. Reduce the force, reduce her mechanical advantage. Chun swayed backwards 6 inches. The strike missed by margins so thin they might have been theoretical. Kyle's secondary left came up immediately. The real attack. Faster, aimed at where she'd moved. This was the new strategy. Make her react, then punish the reaction. Chun dropped under it, weight finally shifting, and suddenly she was inside his guard. Her palm struck his thorax plate. Not hard, just establishing contact. Then she pushed, using his own backward weight transfer against him. Kyle staggered but didn't fall. He drilled for this. His tertiary arms swept low, attempting a leg takedown that should work on bipedal opponents. Chun jumped. Not high, maybe 8 inches, but enough. She landed with one foot on his sweeping arm, used it as a platform, and drove her other knee toward his head. Kyle blocked with his primary right, absorbing the impact. It hurt. Humans had surprising leg strength, but he'd expected worse. He grabbed for her, all forearms converging, trying to secure a hold. If he could grapple, his mass advantage became insurmountable. Chun twisted mid-grab, contorting in a way that shouldn't work with a rigid skeletal structure. She slipped through the closing trap like liquid, one hand catching his secondary wrist and pulling not away from him but across his own body, tangling his arms together. How is she someone started in the crowd? Hypermobility, Ramos said, not looking away from the match. Human shoulder joints can rotate nearly 360 degrees if you train them right. We're basically held together with optimistic connective tissue. Kyle untangled himself, reset his stance. Chun was back in her casual posture, waiting. She still hadn't attacked. Not really. Everything she'd done was reactive, adaptive, turning his offense into her defense into his problem. Kyle changed tactics. He stopped trying to force openings and instead forced her to move, herding her toward the arena boundary with controlled aggression. If she couldn't redirect, she'd have to block or dodge. And either option created patterns he could exploit. Chun let herself be herded for approximately 10 seconds. Then she went forward. Not a technique. Not a form. She just moved into his space with complete disregard for the forearms. Currently trying to establish dominance, she slipped a strike, ducked another, caught the third on her forearm, and rolled with it, absorbing energy instead of resisting. Her other hand found his elbow joint, pressed not striking, just collapsing the structure. Kyle's arm folded. He compensated with the others, trying to create distance. Chun stayed close, dangerously close, inside the effective range where his reach meant nothing and her size became an advantage, because she could move through spaces he couldn't cover. A strike got through Kyle's secondary right. Solid contact with her ribs. A hit that should have ended the match. Chun grunted, shifted her weight, and used the impact to spin into him. Her elbow found the gap between his chest and shoulder plating. Not enough to injure, but enough to make his neural system scream warnings about structural vulnerability. The crowd was losing coherence, individual shouts blending into noise. Kyle tried to create separation. Chun maintained contact, moving with him, around him. Her hands always finding purchase on his armor, his joints. Redirecting every attempt to establish control. It was like fighting smoke. Then she found his center of gravity. Both hands on his lower thorax, one foot hooked behind his rear leg. She didn't throw him. That would require strength she didn't have. Instead, she just removed his foundation while his own movement was carrying him backward. Kyle hit the mat again, but this time he'd trained for it. He rolled, secondary arms pushing off the floor, coming back to his feet in under 2 seconds. Chun was sitting on the arena boundary, legs crossed, retying her bootlac. She looked up. You done? Or should I fix the other one? The crowd went absolutely silent. Kyle stood there, all forearms ready, combat protocols running through his head, trying to process the fact that his opponent had just taken a timeout in the middle of a match. This is not, he started. I'm going to be honest with you, Chun said, finishing with her boot and standing up. You've gotten way better. That grab sequence? Solid work. The force modification on your opening strike was smart. You've clearly been studying. Then why? Because you're still trying to fight me like I'm going to fight back the way you expect. She walked toward him, completely relaxed, hands at her sides. You want to know the actual difference between us? It's not biology. It's not technique. She stopped just outside his strike range. You learned to fight on a planet where combat had rules. Honorable engagement. Proper forms. I learned to fight on a planet where the only rule was see tomorrow. We didn't develop martial arts. We developed whatever kept us breathing long enough to develop martial arts later. Kyle's plates shifted through several colors. Confusion. Frustration. Something that might have been comprehension. You're a better fighter than me, Chun said genuinely. But you're trying to win, and I'm just trying not to lose. And those are completely different objectives that require completely different approaches. She turned, walking toward the exit. Match is yours if you want it. I'm going to get dinner. This is not a legitimate withdrawal, Kyle said, but his voice lacked conviction. Chun paused at the arena boundary. You want to hit someone who's walking away? Go ahead. I'm sure that'll look great on the highlight reel. She left. The crowd sat in stunned silence for approximately 5 seconds, then erupted into arguments about scoring, legitimacy, whether walking away counted as forfeit or dominance. Kyle stood alone in the center of the arena, technically the victor, feeling distinctly like he'd lost something he couldn't quite identify. In the observation booth, Vess turned to her colleagues. I have no idea what we just witnessed. Psychological warfare, suggested the karate observer. No, said Ramos, grinning. That was just Tuesday. You all wanted to see what humans do when they try. That wasn't trying. That was Chun being mildly inconvenienced. Then what? Asked Vess slowly. Does trying look like? Ramos's grin faded. You really don't want to find out. Chun's office was smaller than most people expected for someone with her reputation. Kyle stood in the doorway for a full minute before knocking. It's open, Chun called. He entered, ducking slightly despite the door being built for his height. Chun sat behind her desk, reviewing something on a datapad. Still wearing her training uniform from the arena, she didn't look up. I require an explanation, Kyle said. You require a lot of things, Chun replied, making a notation on the datapad. Most of them involve your ego feeling less bruised. Not sure I can help with that. Kyle's plates flushed amber, then forced themselves back to neutral. He'd spent the walk from the arena to this office practicing emotional regulation exercises. You have defeated me twice. Once could be circumstance. Twice suggests methodology. I want to understand the methodology. No, you don't. Chun finally looked up. You want me to name a technique so you can learn it, counter it, and reaffirm that combat is a logical system where superior preparation equals victory. But that's not what happened, and naming it won't help you. Then what did happen? Chun leaned back in her chair, considering him. You ever study Earth history? Pre-space era? I am familiar with human military campaigns. Guerrilla warfare, asymmetric engagement patterns. Go back further. Before we had armies. When we were just animals trying not to be eaten by other animals. She gestured to the empty chair across from her desk. Sit. This is going to take a minute. Kyle sat, his bulk making the chair look temporary. Humans, Chun began, are terrible at being alive. Objectively terrible. We're slow most predators can outrun us. We're weak most animals our size can overpower us. Our senses are mediocre. Our natural weapons are pathetic. And we're born completely helpless for years. By every logical metric. We should have gone extinct before we figured out fire. Yet you survived. We survived because we learned to cheat. Chun pulled up a holographic display. Earth's evolutionary timeline. See, every other species on our planet developed something. Claws, teeth, armor, venom, speed. We developed anxiety and spite. Kyle's translator struggled with spite for a moment before settling on a definition. Humans learned that we couldn't fight fair, so we didn't fight fair. We threw rocks from distances other predators couldn't reach. We used sticks to extend our pathetic arm length. We hunted by walking after prey until it literally collapsed from exhaustion, not because we were faster, but because we were too stubborn to quit. We won by outlasting, outsmarting, and out-annoying everything that wanted to kill us. This explains tool use, not combat technique. It explains everything about combat technique. Chun dismissed the hologram. Your people, the Vraxians, you evolved on a world where strength mattered. Your biology reflects that. 4 arms for multiple attack vectors. Exoskeleton for defense. Low center of gravity for stability. When you fight, you use the weapons you were born with. She held up her hands 5-fingered, unclawed, completely unremarkable. Humans don't have weapons. We have suggestions. These hands? They're not for fighting. They're for holding tools, making tools, throwing tools. Our entire combat methodology is based on the assumption that we're not supposed to win. You won. I didn't lose, Chun corrected. There's a difference. You came at me trying to demonstrate superiority. I came at you trying to survive the encounter. Those are completely different operational frameworks. Tyle's secondary arms flexed in voluntary frustration response. You claim you were not trying to defeat me. I was trying not to get hit while making it extremely inconvenient for you to keep hitting me. Eventually, you get tired or frustrated or reassess whether the fight was worth the effort. That's not a technique. That's a survival strategy that got formalized into something people now call martial arts. Chun stood, moved to the coffee maker, poured something that smelled like it could strip paint. She didn't offer Kyle any Vraxian biology and caffeine were incompatible. You wanted to know what I used against you? The answer is everything. Your momentum, your expectations, your biomechanical limitations, your assumption that combat follows rules. I use the fact that you're stronger, faster, and better trained, because all of those things make you predictable. That is not. Let me ask you something. Chun turned, coffee in hand. In that arena, how many times did you think about dying? Tyle paused. The match was not lethal. Right, because you knew the rules. You knew medical teams were standing by. You knew I wasn't trying to kill you. So you fought with what? 70% commitment? 80? I held back because the situation allowed me to hold back. Humans don't have that setting. She took a drink, grimaced. Apparently, even she thought it was bad. We have survival mode and not survival mode. And the switch is really sensitive. You tried to demonstrate weakness during a teaching moment. My brain interpreted that as a threat and responded with 10,000 years of evolutionary programming that says redirect the danger before it kills. You are saying your entire species lives in constant threat. Assessment. I'm saying we evolved in an environment where everything was trying to kill us. And we survived by being paranoid, adaptable, and willing to use literally anything as a weapon, including our opponent's advantages. Chum set down the coffee. You have a combat style because you were designed for combat. We have 1,000 combat styles because we were designed for survival and had to make it up as we went. Kyle sat in silence, processing. His worldview built on tactical analysis, strategic superiority. The logical progression of technique development was encountering information it couldn't categorize. So there is no methodology. He said finally, the methodology is chaos refined through desperation. Chun returned to her desk. You asked why you couldn't beat me. It's because you're trying to fight better, and I'm trying not to die better. And evolution spent way more time teaching humans the second thing. Then how? Tyle's voice dropped, something that might have been vulnerability creeping in. How does one defend against an opponent with no consistent approach? You don't. You adapt faster than they do, or you make the fight too costly to continue, or you don't fight them at all. Chun pulled up her datapad again. This is why humans get hired as bodyguards across 6 sectors despite being physically inferior to basically everyone. We're not the strongest or fastest. We're just the species that figured out how to keep fighting after we've already lost. That sounds exhausting. It really is. Chun made another notation. But it's also why we're still here, and why you're sitting in my office asking for lessons instead of writing me up for insubordination. Tyle stood, his bulk making the small office feel smaller. You walked away from the arena. That was not protocol. No, Chun agreed. It was respect. You're a decorated combat instructor who spent 3 days preparing to fight me properly. I wasn't going to humiliate you by ending it definitively. Walking away gave you the technical victory, while making it clear that victory didn't mean what you thought it meant. That is manipulative. That's tactical. Chun looked up at him. You wanted to learn what I did. Now you know. Humans don't fight like we have claws, because we don't have claws. We fight like we've already been wounded and are just trying to make it hurt both ways. It's not pretty. It's not honorable, and it definitely doesn't fit into your training manuals. But it works. Kyle moved toward the door, then paused. The video footage from the arena is still spreading across 6 sectors. By morning, it will reach 8. By next week, combat academies on 12 stations will be requesting consultations with human instructors, trying to understand the methodology. They won't find one, Chun said. Not really, because there isn't a technique to learn. Just a species that survived by refusing to fight fair and somehow turned its survival instinct into an art form. Kyle nodded slowly, something like understanding finally settling into his posture. Thank you, Instructor Chun, for the honesty. Thank you for asking good questions. She returned to her datapad. Doors that way. Try not to demonstrate any more weaknesses on your way out. Kyle left. His understanding of combat fundamentally rearranged Doc behind him. Chun continued reviewing training schedules, drinking terrible coffee, existing in the casual space between fights that her species had learned to occupy while remaining perpetually ready for the next one. She had another class in 20 minutes, basic hand-to-hand for first-year cadets. Half of them would show up thinking they understood combat because they'd watched the arena footage. She'd correct that assumption. Gently, of course, but firmly. It was, after all, just another Tuesday, and humans had survived far worse than teaching. End.